Peter Parfitt and welcome to part 2 of my mini-series of the extras that you can do with your Festool Domino DF500 and Domino DF700. Now, in part 1 you would have seen me make this simple jig which allows all of these extras to be done very quickly and easily. You'll have also seen me using the jig fit hinges in a door and frame. Now in part 2 I'm going to show you how easy it is to fit a mortise lock in a door using the DF700 Domino. And if you've got lots of doors to do, this is definitely the approach to use because it's quick and easy. Saves you time, saves you money. I have here the frame of a door that I'm making for a shed. The top is there, and this is the outside, and this area here will be filled with treated tongue and groove boarding. Now I wish to put a mortise lock in here, and I'm going to show you how to do that using the Domino 700. That big domino of course will cut slots up to 70mm deep, and it just happens that the recess that I'll need for this is 68, so I will set it at 70 for a little bit of clearance. Now in order to set the jig up, I have marked on the jig the centre line plus the line where the domino edge would sit if it had its crosshair on the centre line. And I do my measuring from these outer two lines, where the edge of the domino would be if it had its crosshairs on the centre line. So I need to cut a slot 75mm long with a 10mm cutter. And on my little telltale block I know that a 10mm cutter normally produces a 24mm wide hole. And using the standard formula, I take 24 away from the width of the slot I want, that's 75, which leaves 51. I then divide 51 by 2, making 25.5, and I measure 25.5 from my outer edge here to where the stop will be, and 25.5 from the left-hand edge to where the stop will be. So that means when I now apply the domino to this, its left and right are set such that it will cut a slot exactly 75mm wide. Now for setting the height in the frame where I want the cut to be made, I have to first of all measure the thickness of the frame, and that is 44mm. So half of that is 22, so my centre line is at the 22mm mark. If I use a 10mm cutter at the 22mm mark, it will still require a further cut 3mm higher and 3mm lower to make a 16mm cut dead centre. Obviously I don't need to do the centre cut, I just need to do the one 3 up and the one that's 3 down. So if my 22mm is my centre, 3 up is 19 and 3 down is 25. So therefore my first cut will be at 19 centre and the second cut will be at 25 centre. I have to take account of the thickness of my jig. That's 25mm. If you forget to do that, you end up having a whoopsie like I did in my practice session. So 25mm, we wanted, the first cut was going to have a setting of 19, so 25 and 19 is 44. And the second cut, which had a centre of 25, well that's 25 and 25 is 50. So there's a cut of 44 and a cut of 50. And you can check that the figures are right because they should differ by 6. 44 and 50 differ by 6. So those will be the settings that I set on the domino for my depth here, 44 and 50. Right, here we go. I'll just check my settings. 70 deep. I've got my height set at 44. I've got my 10mm bit in. I've got the width setting on narrow. I've got my jig set up, and away I go. the first cut. All I need to do now is change my height setting to 50, and I do the second cut exactly as the jig was. You should always check that your domino is not going to ground on your surface when you're doing something like this, and I'm just clear. So there's my slot. And that's it, 2 screws, and that's done. Right, well, this being a mortise lock, it needs a hole for the key. Now, I could do it the old-fashioned way, which is mark it up and then drill lots of holes and wiggle it around a bit, but that's not terribly clever, and it's certainly not as quick as what I'm about to do. I've marked where the centre line of this slot should be, and I know how deep the centre of it is. And so why don't I cut a domino slot? And if I look at my reference block, a nice 8mm domino standard width will be perfect. So 8mm domino, in my case 49mm deep at that centre line, will do just the job. And I can do that using the big domino. I could use the small domino, but it cannot do a depth cut down to 49mm. So I'd have to use it standing it on the surface like so, with a line marked here. So not quite such a good way. So I'm all ready to go. I've got my depth set to just 30. I don't want it to break through the other side. I'd rather do it once from each side to make it nice and clean. And depth, my height is 49, and everything else is locked up, and I've got the correct cutter in. So here I go. So that's that, a nice clean hole. Pop that in there. And let's see whether this works. Absolutely spot on. But there we go. That's quick and simple. In part 3, you'll see how I use extra wide dominoes to make this gate. I'll show you how the dominoes are made, and I'll show you again, using this jig, how simple and easy it is to use extra wide dominoes in your carpentry.